This video is sponsored by Aquashine Exteriors, professional jet washing and cleaning services across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, including Dorset, Hampshire and Wiltshire. Are you feeling it's time to get that driveway nice and shiny for when you come home? Or are you wanting to get that guttering tidied up and spotless again? They deliver this, plus much, much more. Please head into the description below where you'll find their details for their website, including the socials, Facebook and Instagram. You also need to find their before and after portfolio. You can also call them on 07503 998 088 for a free quotation. Don't wait till next week. Don't think you'll do it another day. Pick up the phone, give them a call, check them out. Good evening and welcome to Cherries Red Army, which is now a 1.5k subscriber YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Welcome to Bournemouth and Tottenham fans as we prepare for a massive fixture in the Premier League at a wonderful football stadium on Saturday. Do subscribe then if you're new to Cherries Red Army. We've got some brilliant guests this evening, good conversations to be had. That interactive chat is open, so make sure you use it. Get your thoughts in there and hit the like button. We do like to get to at least 50 likes on these videos. It does help with the video inside of YouTube. Between now and kick off, look, I don't want to waste no time. We've got some great guests. We've got a Sky Sports guy who likes his golf and his football, knows a bit about Bournemouth as well. We've got someone who's coached at Bournemouth and Tottenham, and we've got a Cherries Red Army contributor. Look, Bournemouth are on their way to survival. We don't generally get a lot at Tottenham, but this time, just this time, can it be different?
Cheeky one, square, and
I am back in the presenting seat. It is the Adam Smith derby. Jon Spark, how are you this evening?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thanks very much for having me back on, Kirk. I don't need to worry about presenting this time. Thank God for that. But it's odd. It's a half celebrity panel today, so I'll try not to be intimidated this time.
Yeah, great to have you on, our Bournemouth fan. Our second guest is a former Bournemouth and Spurs coach, currently at Colchester United, a friend of the channel, Ross Embleton. How are you doing, Ross?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on. Celebrity panel is something I've never been referred to. Nice.
Also, Ross, you were on former Bournemouth player Joe Partington's podcast recently, the Leave No Doubt podcast. We actually had him on at the start of the season with ePerform. Do tell the fans a little bit about that before we get cracking on with this preview.
Oh, well, firstly, what a guy Joe Partington is. So, obviously, we crossed paths when I was taking the 18s at Bournemouth, and he was obviously a player in League One championship win or promotional season, and we've stayed in touch ever since. Had a lot in common. Like I say, I think he's a top guy. Obviously had a really good career as well, but I'm a big fan of his podcast. So when it first started, used to talk to him a lot about presenting and some of the questions and bits and pieces that he was trying to bring into the podcast. So I was surprised and delighted to have been on it. So I really enjoyed it. Talked a lot about coaching, developing players, and then obviously my current recruitment role as well.
Yeah, do check it out. Joe Partington's Instagram and ePerform, you'll find it there. My final guest, he's a Spurs fan. He likes his golf. He likes his football. He's also had a few gigs at Dean Court. It's Jamie Weir. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, very well. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
And before we talk football, it is a football preview, Jamie, but there was a little golf tournament last weekend, the Masters. Jon Rahm, he kept his composure on that final day. It was an interesting weekend with the weather. You've got to tell us a bit about that weekend. You were there, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, the weather was interesting, and we had 3 trees falling and miraculously missing everybody. I was about 200 yards away when that happened. I heard this massive bang. And sure enough, just bizarre. But a fitting champion in the end. I think, he deserved to win it. And, I'm a big fan of Jon Rahm. There's nobody in the game that has a greater sort of respect for the history and tradition of the game than Jon Rahm. He's a really interesting guy to speak to. And I interviewed him on Sunday night, a couple of hours after he'd got his green jacket. And yeah, just an incredible experience. Augusta is, as you can imagine, just incredible. It's just everything's so beautiful. And you've seen the course and you've seen the clubhouse and Butler Cabin, whatever, on TV. But it's everything behind the scenes that doesn't necessarily need to be pretty for TV, like the palatial press center or the gift shop or the concession stands, or there's not a blade of grass out of place, not a pine needle out of place, and it's like utopia. So incredible week, fitting champion, and my body clock is slowly recovering from it.
Yeah, and I'm at Moores Valley for those local to Bournemouth next Thursday. Not quite hitting the numbers of Jon Rahm, but I'm having a bit of fun and I'm getting out in the lovely weather, hopefully. Who have we got joining us this evening? We've got Chris Hubble, Bournemouth fan. We've got Sean. Hey, peeps, how's it hanging? We've got Matthew Gale. We've got Mark Singleton, who I think got the result right at Leicester last weekend. We've got Alan, AFCB Fan TV. We've got Phoenix joining us as well, and Carol Toller. Anyone else currently joining us live, do throw it in the chat. We will throw it on the screen. Ross, talking about venues that are amazing. I mean, you were probably at Tottenham when they were at White Hart Lane, but the Spurs Stadium, which I did go to in our final season before we got relegated into the Championship, what an arena that is for football players nowadays.
Mind blowing. I think it's an arena for a lot of different people, isn't it? Not just football players anymore. And I haven't actually been to a game of football there yet, but I've been to the American football. So it's an incredible stadium. One of the things, or two of the things that really, really impressed me the most before you get to the football part of it, I suppose, is the first one that they seem to have found a way of covering everything in terms of keeping people in the stadium before and after the games. It's absolutely fantastic how they've mastered that. The other side of it that's really impressive is when you go in there, you still feel like you're at White Hart Lane, even though it's the polar opposite of stadium. So it's an absolute masterstroke. And like I say, without having been there to a game of football yet, it's an extremely impressive place. And they've done it all in a very run-down, difficult area to have been developed in terms of what Tottenham's like as a whole,
It's quite a build, Jamie, really, because they did try to do it as they were sort of coming out of White Hart Lane, if I can remember, and now they're going to try and put a Formula One track under it, which I don't quite understand. But as Spurs fans, you must be like blown away with the stadium you've got now in the Premier League and in football in general.
The stadium's incredible. I mean, I think it's the greatest stadium in the world. The way the football pitch can slide out and you've got an NFL pitch underneath, the fact that they're hosting concerts there. I mean, everything about it, as Ross was just saying, is, about the whole fan experience, about getting fans in there before the game. There's incredible food and drink, wide variety on offer, and live music before and after the games. It's just a shame the football inside the stadium's so dreadful at the moment. But hey-ho, you can't have everything.
I mean, John, I know we're going to try and go to Tottenham on Saturday and get some points. We don't get any points at Tottenham generally. But as a minimum, as a footballer in a Bournemouth shirt on Saturday, I mean, if you're not up for a game of football inside that stadium, then I really don't know what to do anymore.
Well, I mean, I'd love to talk from experience in that regard, but as we both know, Kirk, unfortunately, we weren't gifted with enough to do that yet. No. But it's. I mean, they did their research on it. They modelled. They modelled one of the ends after the yellow wall at Dortmund, which is one of the most famous sort of crowd atmospheres in the world in football. Well, certainly in Europe. I'm sure South America would probably argue with a few of those, but it's just they built it. They purpose built it to create one of the best atmospheres in the country. And, you would like to think that enough Bournemouth fans in there can certainly just help create the racket to drive on the supporters. But, if Tottenham are playing well, which is an if this season, unfortunately, but if they are, then, that the atmosphere that can be generated there must be close to nothing else that you can get in England, really.
Now, there was a first fixture between the teams earlier on in the season in a stadium, Dean Court, which some people might like to take the mick out every now and again, but it's a unique stadium in itself. It's very close to the pitch. Jamie will know he's covered a few games there, sort of stepping in for Mike Botto. But on that day earlier on in the season, Jamie, you were 2-0 down at one point, but Antonio Conte did roll the dice. He did bring some players off the bench. You did strike back and win 3-2 and took all 3 points, and you broke the Cherries' hearts.
Jamie, how did you find the game?
Sorry, was that a question to me? I thought you were queuing into
yeah,
something.
sorry, Jamie. Yeah, that 3-2 win for you
right,
earlier on in the season.
No, we absolutely, that was a smash and grab that day. I don't think Spurs deserved the 3 points at all. Last minute winner from Rodrigo Bentancur, who's now obviously out for the season. Kiefer Moore was just having a field day with our back three all day long, in particular Davinson Sanchez. And, Spurs absolutely got away with one there. We definitely didn't deserve to take anything from that game at all. And I think there's been a few of those moments for Bournemouth this season, away at Arsenal as well, when it looked as if they were going to get something out of that game, and then a real sucker punch was virtually the last kick of the match. And it was you said Antonio Conte rolled the dice and made some changes. The big criticism from Spurs fans this season is they didn't do that too often, which is why he's now no longer Spurs manager. But on that occasion, the changes he made a big difference. And I think it was Sessegnon got the first Spurs goal, great ball through from Weir. I can't even remember the second one now. It was back in October, wasn't it? Who got the second one? You can remind me.
I want to think it was Ben Davis header.
Ben Davis header.
Travers
that's
didn't
right.
read
Yeah. And then the last one was just sort of Travers flapped a bit at a corner, didn't he? And Bentancur was in the right place at the right time. But the first 2 goals Bournemouth took beautifully. The first was sort of counter attack, which Kiefer Moore took very well, and then the second one just using his strength to ragdoll Davinson Sanchez all over the place, which is kind of a story of Davinson Sanchez's Spurs career. But Bournemouth deserved the points that day, and I remember before when it was Nathan Ake got the only goal Spurs played. Ended that game with 9 men. I remember that game. I remember the COVID game when we didn't deserve a point. I think there was a perfectly good goal disallowed for Bournemouth the season they went down as well. So it's been an eventful venue for us, Dean Court, for Spurs. But in terms of games at White Hart Lane, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, I still call it White Hart Lane. Spurs have always had the better of Bournemouth. But I've got a funny feeling this weekend might be different.
Well, it might be different because we're going to look at those lineups later, and I don't think they're as scary as they potentially could be. Ross, you've been a coach, you've been a head coach. Do talk to me about how you can be in a game where you're comfortably winning 2-0, you've dominated the fixture, then suddenly you drop 50 yards into your own half, invite pressure and concede 3 goals and help the opposition. Why does that happen in football?
I think the first answer is probably what you said about pressure. Is about trying to maintain like the consistent mindset of game plan doesn't change even though we've gone a goal, or in this case that we're talking 2 goals up. So I think it's sometimes it's elements of that in terms of players, coaches sometimes, but I think first and foremost what goes on the pitch, players like to hang on to what they've got rather than sticking to a particular direction that they're playing in or a particular game plan that's been put in place before. And as the coach, it can be really frustrating to try and change that dynamic in terms of it, because it is a mindset. You can change the shape, you can change the personnel, and obviously these days you can change the personnel in a lot bigger way than previously in terms of the amount of subs that you can make. But sometimes it's really difficult to turn that tide because it's a mentality thing. So I think, like I say, without repeating myself, the pressure is obviously a certain part of that. I think the other side of it as well is, Jamie mentioned there about how it changed in the previous game and the roll of the dice from Conte. But I think I remember back to that sort of period that Tottenham did that on a number of occasions. And I know talking and listening to a lot of Tottenham fans and friends that followed the club, it was of a real frustration that they didn't ever really come out and impose themselves in the same fashion first half as they were in the second. And there seemed to be almost that, although the fans didn't like it at the time, there almost seemed to be that it wasn't as much of a fluke. It wasn't as much of a roll of the dice because they kept doing it at that time. And obviously, the dynamics change now in terms of that luck or that fortune or that change and roll of the dice didn't continue to happen for long enough for Conte to keep his job or to change it. So sort of gone away from the actual question, but I do think it is sometimes, Kirk, the way in which you set out Bournemouth at, very front foot in terms of the way they try to go and play, but you get a couple of goals ahead and sometimes it's almost a little bit like, whoa, this wasn't part of the script, especially in a game where you're not expected to go 2 goals up, that the mindset and the focus changes.
It did remind me as well of the Arsenal game a few years ago where we were like 3-1 up, 3-0 up, and then we did the similar thing and we got a draw. We probably should have lost that game if there was another 5 minutes, but we got away with a draw, and that was previously under Eddie Howe. So not a great day in October for Bournemouth, John, but last weekend was a good day for the Cherries, a good day for Gary O'Neill. The game plan did work. It was a poor Leicester City side. It was 1-0 to Bournemouth. Maddison assisted Philip Billing, our top goal scorer, and we got the 3 points in what was a must-win, in my opinion, a 6-pointer. We're in a really good place now going into this fixture and the other games between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, that really was a massive 6-pointer. Obviously, it was at the time it was 19th versus 18th, but the trajectory of the two sides meant that whilst Leicester were at home, Bournemouth were going into that game with a lot more confidence than Leicester were. I mean, as we now stand, Bournemouth have 4 wins from their last 8. They've gone very flip-floppy in terms of winning and losing and winning and losing, but Leicester have. I think they've got 1 win in the last 10, something along those lines. I think they beat Brentford. I think that was the one I was thinking of, Everton. But they certainly haven't been getting the results. But then Bournemouth have been getting what they deserve from a lot of their games, whereas Leicester have really stopped scoring many goals. They're struggling to defend. A fascinating stat about Leicester is that of all their wins so far this season, every single one of them has been by 2 goals or more. They have not managed to eke out a win at all. It's clear that when things go well for Leicester, they just thrive with it. But when things are getting down and dirty at all, they struggle to compete. Whereas Bournemouth is, I think it's kind of what Bournemouth were expecting this season. I think, Ross was mentioning as we were chatting before going live that, Bournemouth don't look like they're in a struggling position. The manager speaks with confidence. The players speak with confidence and seem in a good place, whereas a lot of the managers down there just don't. And obviously, Brendan Rodgers was sacked recently. And I would say one of the reasons for that is Bournemouth were expecting to be down here. I mean, as much as Leicester definitely weren't, Southampton maybe, but I don't think they were expecting to be this bad. You got a number of the teams, West Ham, Wolves, Leeds, basically all of them are just sort of struggling and scraping to get out. Whereas Bournemouth have been down here. We were down here for 5 years before we eventually fell. So there's a much stronger belief that relegation is something that you embrace and you battle against, rather than try and escape with your tails between your legs. And I think that is something that is a really strong part of this squad. And against Leicester, we really made that show. We utterly deserved that win and really could have won that by 3 or 4, just with some slightly better finishing, which is something that a lot of Bournemouth fans have been talking about this season.
Yeah, I couldn't believe we only scored 1 goal. Absolute madness. We should have won that game 3 or 4-0 comfortably, as you said. And Spurs, Jamie, also got a win last weekend. There's a bit of luck involved if you speak to Brighton fans. We'll come to VAR in a moment, but I'm sure you'll take it, Jamie.
If you speak to Spurs fans, there was a bit of luck involved as well. I mean, I've just said that 3-2 back in October at Dean Court, we didn't deserve to win that one. We absolutely didn't deserve to win last weekend. Brighton dominated Spurs from start to finish. Spurs looked toothless at times. We had a couple of decisions go our way. I think it was definitely a penalty for Brighton. The 2 handballs, I actually think were both handballs. In fairness, I don't really know what Roberto De Zerbi's getting his knickers and twist about that one for. But Brighton were the better side. There's absolutely no two ways about it. And sometimes you'd need a bit of a smash and grab. And we've had an awful lot of bad luck over the years as well. So we'll take any bit of good luck we get. But when you've got players like Heung-min Son and Harry Kane who can produce 2 world-class finishes, that was the difference between the 2 sides. And there's Arnaud Danjuma, who we saw the lesser spotted Arnaud Danjuma. There's been a lot of frustration from Spurs fans. He hasn't been used too much recently, But it would be typical if he came back to haunt Bournemouth and score a winner this weekend. But look, at the moment for Spurs, I think 99% of Spurs fans are just trying to get through to the end of the season. It's been pretty miserable this season. And look, we're still sitting fifth and within a decent shot of getting Champions League football, but it's been another trophyless season. The football's been dire at times. We've gone through another world-class manager. There's speculation over whether our best player is going to leave in the summer. So it's a pretty miserable time to be a Spurs fan at the moment. So last Saturday was a bit of blessed relief, a match we absolutely did not deserve to win, but we somehow managed to conjure 3 points from.
Ross, Daniel Levy would have been watching that from his box, and he's looking at the dugouts and he knows that he's got an interim person involved on his side. Was he looking at De Zerbi as potentially someone he might want to bring to the Spurs club next season?
I think he wouldn't be doing his job properly if he wasn't. I think with what Brighton have done this season, like incredibly so, he deserves to be linked with all of the top opportunities at the moment. And I just hope that the fact that Graham Potter's move didn't go great doesn't stop people from looking at managers like that. They deserve the opportunities that hopefully come their way. So I think the answer to that is yes. I think one of the big things that's been missed as well last week is just how good, Jamie just referred to it there, but just how good the winning goal was. So it was a smash and grab. All the madness happened in terms of the VAR and was it penalties, was it this, was it that? The winning goal was unbelievable. So they have got those moments of quality, haven't they? And the squad still, as much as it's not been the season that Tottenham have hoped for, it hasn't had the same level of performance I'm sure that everyone would have wished for throughout the season. But that was a special moment in terms of the goal that won the game.
John, I'm sure we've been here at some point this season. Let's just talk about VAR briefly. I say briefly. Let's try briefly again. We know we've not even had a penalty this season yet. Just thought I'd put that in there, Jamie. We've not had a penalty yet. VAR, this was not hit its part to play in when they built this, I suppose. They've had a change in the head of the guy that's sort of overseeing it. We're still seeing the inconsistencies. I still think they tried to implement too much too soon. Goal line technology works. I think VAR needed to come in stages. There's so much if and buts in it that it's just causing all this confusion. And for me, yeah, it's really causing a lot of stress on a lot of fans. And when there's money involved, it amplifies.
Yeah, and particularly for that, when you think about the Brighton Spurs result before, as Jamie was talking about, it's just, you know, these things happen, and sometimes when it goes your way, it's, you know, it's blessed relief, and you think, you walk home thinking, God, if we played that 100 more times, we're not going to win that ever again. But the thing is about that is, as well as you mentioned, sort of the money, and that if Brighton had won that game, they'd be level or a point behind. They would have been a point behind Spurs with a game in hand, I think. No, I don't think so. But it would have been very, very close. And now instead of a 1 point gap or 0 point gap, a 6 or 7 point gap.
Yeah.
And Brighton could have been really looking for Champions League. I don't think they quite could have made it that far, but they certainly would have been looking to solidify Europa League place. And let's say they get conference instead and they miss out by a couple of points. That's a large chunk of money that they've just lost out on because of some very, very debatable decisions. And that's the important thing, is that VAR was initially brought in to make sure that the concrete decisions were made correct. And I think that if it only works for the concrete decisions, so it's goal line technology, mistaken identity, offside calls, which, as much as people get annoyed when it's like a hair's breadth offside, you've got to draw the line somewhere. And if it makes those calls, I'm happy with that. Everything that's cut and dry. After that, you want it to get the really obvious things right, but there's very little that is totally objective in football, and that's the problem. I personally think we should be changing to a challenge system. That's my thing. That's my way I would go about it. I would change it to an NFL style, tennis style challenge system, because if you look at the decisions that were made in that game, the Mitoma handball, the assistant ref made that one. And that's an interesting call that could have gone either way. I would respect the assistant ref's decision on that one. I have no issue with him calling that as a handball, even if it's very, very close to borderline. But the Welbeck goal that goes off McAllister, I think it was, where from one angle it looks like it comes off his arm, the other angle looks like it goes off his hip, then his arm. Like, No one challenged that. There wasn't a single Spurs player that was calling for handball there. And I think in that situation, why does the referee have to get involved? Because no one that doesn't get looked at all in terms of like the water cooler chat of the next week for Brighton and Tottenham fans. It's just a genuine goal. And I do think that if you had some sort of decision where if a manager felt like something had been missed and wants to challenge it, maybe risk a substitution, then go for something like that. It just stops VAR from being as involved as it needs to be, because the less it's involved, and I really want VAR to work. Yeah. I really, really want it to work. But it's the human error. It's the humans that are messing it up. The technology is fine. So I would just try and limit it as much as possible. And that would be what I would like to see going forward, but I don't think that's actually going to happen.
And I just add to that, John, that, you know, the penalty that wasn't given, again, the referee didn't award that penalty. So if we exist in a no VAR world, there still isn't a penalty given in that instance. And the VAR looked at it and said, it's not a clear and obvious error. There's not enough there for me to overturn it. So obviously, if on field the ref had given a penalty, then it would have remained a penalty. But, you know, I think the big problem we have, and I don't think anybody can disagree in this, is that the standard of officiating isn't good enough. And, you know, everybody always blames, oh, VAR this, VAR that, oh, the technology is ruining the game. Well, the standard of the officials is what's ruining the game at the moment.
But the other thing as well, Ross, I think it's doing two other things that is hurting the game. Is sometimes is the time. So you're going into the quickest, most exciting league in the world, and it's being stopped for 3-4 minutes sometimes. And then the other thing is that you've got linesmen that are not making decisions because they're waiting for the technology to give the answers. And then, as I said earlier, you've been in a position where you've been a head coach and you're protecting these footballers, and they might get injured when you know it's a clear offside by 5 yards, but they're just waiting for the technology because they don't want to be the one that's to blame.
Yeah, and well, everything that everyone's just said there, totally agree with. I think it's there seems to be so many loopholes in everything that everybody's doing, or there seems to be so many little margins that create uncertainty for everyone. So like you mentioned there about the offside, even in the EFL or, you know, the National League further down the pyramid, there's still this delay to giving an offside. Do you know what I mean? So there's things happening beyond or around the decision that create uncertainty around officials. So the delay in putting the flag up until somebody runs after it or touches the ball, it's just another element that I think causes real uncertainty for everyone, but of course the people that are making or not making the decisions on the pitch. And just to refer back to the game at the weekend, like with a handball, I was actually watching the review on Sky on Monday or Tuesday morning, and they were talking about the handball that led to the disallowed goal, and that even then the referee in the studio was saying that he controlled it with a certain part of his arm, and certain parts of your arm are okay now if it covers the badge or part of the sleeve and comes up. Even the description that he was giving after the event didn't make any sense. So if we can't get that little bit right in the build-up, how on earth does anybody make a decision that we are or we aren't all going to agree with?
Well, am I right in thinking on that? Maybe I'm misremembering here, but wasn't there an appalling decision when Bournemouth played West Ham?
Volleyball.
Craig Dawson, basically did like sort of volleyball pass that West Ham scored from. And I could not believe that wasn't overturned. And I think Gary O'Neill was equally sort of apoplectic about it. But that was extraordinary, that.
Yeah. Although you can go to St James's Park and Jeff Lerma can turn his head completely and it can hit his arm and we get a penalty against us. But that's how it feels for fans sometimes. It's going to continue the conversation. We know it's going to go into next pre-season and the next season. And hopefully, like John said, we can get this technology working the way it should. Let's look at some of the teams then. Jamie, coming to you for Spurs. You've got match winners that we've spoken about. We'll talk about Harry Kane in a moment, your top goal scorer. But I'm going to show you a predicted lineup from an app that I pulled this afternoon. As I've said, I don't think the lineup's as scary as I think. Do give me your thoughts on that lineup, but talk to us about players that are available on Saturday and players that are going to be good and the players to watch out for Spurs on Saturday.
Yeah, well, let's have a look at what you've got.
Let's get it on the screen and I'll help you, shall I? This is your predicted 11, which looks very similar to the one that you had last weekend, I think.
Yeah, that's unchanged, I think, isn't it, from the team that started against Brighton and the game before that as well. Lloris is back from his injury. There was a little bit of debate about whether Forster should have stayed in the team, but your club captain, you can't really not have him in the side, so he's back, and he hasn't done really anything particularly wrong since he's come back, in fairness. That back three is pretty settled now. Ben Davies is injured, so Longley's playing on the left side of the back three. Eric Dyer is kind of ever present in the centre there, and Christian Romero is obviously the one world-class defender that we've got, World Cup winner, etc. Porro has taken a little bit of time to settle into the team, but is starting to show a bit of his class now. I think he gives you a real attacking threat. Antonio Conte's system was so reliant on having efficient wing-backs, and Pedro Porro's just kind of hit the ground running once Antonio Conte's gone, which is a shame. On the other side, Perisic has been a massive, massive disappointment, a huge letdown this season for Spurs fans. Again, I think they were hoping that with a system that relies so heavily on wing-backs, to have a world-class, proven, been there, seen it, done it, got the T-shirt wing-back in Ivan Perisic was going to be, really promising. And he just hasn't been at the races at all. And I think part of Heung-min Son's poor form is down to the fact that he's having to do a lot of work for Ivan Perisic on the left-hand side. Again, in midfield there, we saw Højbjerg and Skip. That's kind of enforced at the moment because Basuma and Bentancur are out for the season. And then that front three, what can you say about them? Son, Kane, and Kulusevski, and Richarlison to come off the bench as well. Kulusevski again has had a little bit of a lull, but is just starting to show a bit of what he can do again. And Sonny has had a poor season by his very high standards, but that was a great goal. He took that goal brilliantly against Brighton last weekend. And Harry Kane. I mean, what can you say about Harry Kane? Yeah. My hunch is he's still going to be a Spurs player next season. That's just my gut feeling. I hope I'm right. But also there isn't a single Spurs fan that would begrudge him leaving the club, to be honest. But he is the difference maker a lot of the time. And I think if it wasn't for that absolute freak show up at the Etihad scoring 40 goals this season, a lot of people would be talking about how many goals Harry Kane has scored because he got like 23 Premier League goals this season, which for somebody who's also our best playmaker and our best.
Oh, just gone on mute a minute, Jamie. Can't hear you. You've just popped on mute. I don't know if it's your headphones. Come over to John whilst hopefully Jamie can... Are you back, Jamie? You might be back. Can you hear us, Jamie? We'll just come to John.
Hang on, I'm having audio issues.
Oh, you're there.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear us, Jamie? Can you hear us?
We'll wait and see when he puts his earphones back in. Hopefully he'll be able to hear us.
Yeah. John, whilst Jamie hopefully sorts out his audio, John, as I said, that side doesn't look like the scariest Tottenham side I've ever seen. They've got match winners up top, but when I look at the back, I definitely think there are weaknesses. The goalkeeper sometimes can be a little bit dodgy. The back three is not the strongest back three I've ever seen in the Premier League. There are chances for Bournemouth if we are brave in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd expect there to be. It's the dangerous aspect of the most dangerous, obviously, aspect of Tottenham is definitely their strike partnerships. In terms of you've got Son, although he's been a little bit off his game so far this season. Harry Kane's the major problem, and then obviously Kulusevski is a player that they've really badly missed. Is one of the best playmakers in the Premier League, I think, when he's on his form, from based on what we saw of him last season and the glimpses we've seen this season. The midfield without Bentancur, who absolutely tore us to shreds when he came on in the reverse fixture, that's a big positive for us, because when you've got a player that really had such an impact and not on the opposition side the next time around, it really does help. But yeah, the defense, I mean, Jamie mentioned Romero is a World Cup winner. He is definitely their strongest centre back. But Dyer is someone that's always had questions about him, always been a little bit suspect. And then I have to remember who did we have as predicted on the left? It wasn't Davies. At left centre back for Spurs.
Longley,
that's it. Longley's, yeah. Longley, I don't think has been all that great either. And then Lloris has his days. Let's put it that way. So Perisic not been great, and Porro, I think as much as he's coming into form, is still someone that you maybe defensively a little bit suspect and someone you can take advantage of. The issues for Bournemouth will be just making sure that we get ourselves further up the pitch to actually sort of take on these Spurs players, because
Can you hear me?
I think I'm coming through on Jamie's microphone. Just there we go. But yeah, it's I think we've definitely got a chance. It's not going to be easy at all, but we'll come into. But as we mentioned with our record against Spurs, not only is our record at Spurs' stadiums bad, it's terrible. Spurs have also had a really good home record this season. If I remember correctly, they've got 11 wins and 4 losses. They actually haven't drawn at home this season yet. No. So, I don't rate our chances that highly, but this is not the free hit that I think a lot of people may imply that it could be, because Spurs, I think the favourite phrase I have about Spurs this season is they seem to have failed upwards. They've sort of just managed to win games and produce things when most of the fans have been very disappointed with the style of play and really what's been on the pitch so far this season. So if Bournemouth can try and take advantage of this sort of like possible, this is, I hate the phrase transition period because it's used for every club basically every time of the season, but this sort of transition from Conte to the interim manager to whatever is beyond that, there's a chance. There's always a chance. It's just not a very big one.
We do apologise on YouTube. We are live. This is what happens when we stream, but we want to be interactive with you. I think Jamie is back with us. We'll come to him in a moment. He might need to unmute himself. We just might get a bit of feedback, but we'll come to Jamie in a moment. But Ross, quickly, Harry Kane. Look, he's a great striker. He's done amazing things for England. Jamie gave his thoughts on whether he'll be a Tottenham player next season. I do look at Harry Kane and think, is this an Alan Shearer moment? For all of his accolades, winning medals for his club, not many. And is this a moment for Harry Kane where he needs to maybe look at moving to finally get some league titles, Champions League trophies? Because the Spurs fans love him, but Harry Kane is in his final sort of chapter, would you say?
Yeah, very, very difficult one. And I think Jamie summarised it perfectly when he said there that everybody that's associated with Tottenham will be hoping that he sticks around and that he stays and gives them. I think if he were to leave, it would leave an incredibly large hole for them to try to fill. Very similar to when Gareth Bale left, wasn't it, in terms of that huge amount of money that he brought in. Obviously, I don't think Harry would determine as much of a fee as he did this time last year, but it'd still be a substantial amount of money. But reinvesting it in this day and age and in the manner that Tottenham have previously would be very, very difficult. I personally don't think he goes. At the start of the season, I think if I'd have been asked this question, I think I would have said, yeah, to give it one more good go with Conte to see if world-class manager circumstances, because he desperately wants to be there and wants to get success at Tottenham. I'm just not convinced it happens now. I don't know exactly why, but I think that he will remain at Tottenham. And there's, I think it was Jamie, it might be you, John, there that just mentioned about his goal return this season has been fantastic again. And the attraction of, again, sticking around at Tottenham, hoping that things improve, might just be enough of an attraction for him. I know it's well publicised that he's got another baby on the way. So I think all them circumstances, however wealthy the guy is, however amazing his circumstances will be, even if he were to relocate to Manchester, for example, does uproot your whole life and does change the circumstances for everybody. So I think his attachment to Spurs and his desire to do something within his career and to stay in the Premier League may just mean that they keep hold of him.
Jamie, we're going to do a mic test with you then. Your final thoughts on Harry Kane. Could the deciding factor be who the manager is? Maybe Pochettino again?
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can you all hear me? I'm having a few AirPod issues here, so apologies for that, and apologies if it's a bit echoey. Perhaps, and I think every Spurs fan, I think 90% of the fan base want Pochettino back. I'm certainly a Poch back guy. It looks like Nagelsmann is now going to, turn down Tottenham. I don't blame him. And, there's others out there, De Zerbi, Potter, Brendan Rodgers. There's plenty of names in the mix. Arnie Slot today as well. Poch back, I think, would be one way to unite a pretty disenfranchised fan base at the moment. And it might be the one thing that persuades Harry Kane to stay. That said, when I say persuade Harry Kane to stay, I think he's actually really happy where he is. Call me naive, but, Ross touched upon it there. He's got a young family. They're settled where they are. He's married to his childhood sweetheart. He's a Spurs boy. He's not that kind of superstar who's got a bit of an ego and is constantly wanting to, look for the big move. I think he's very settled where he is. When he broke Jimmy Greaves' record a couple of months ago, he will have felt that love from the terraces. All the fans stayed behind to, sing he's one of our own. And I think he appreciates just how much he is adored by the Spurs fans. And I also think that, even if it was to win an FA Cup with Tottenham, that would mean a lot more. It'd be given much greater sense of achievement than moving to Bayern Munich and winning a Bundesliga. I could go and move to Bayern Munich and win the Bundesliga. Or, if he were to move to Manchester United, well, are Manchester United really in that better a position than Spurs at the moment? I'm not sure they are. Okay, they've won a trophy this season, but they're still in a rebuilding process as well. So, I don't know. If I were Harry, my hunch, as I said, is that he will stay and be a one-club man. And the stick that is always used to beat him with is, oh yeah, but he hasn't won any trophies. But he is world class. I think sometimes there's this very strange tall poppy syndrome in England where when you've got somebody who is world class, who goes about his business the right way, the ultimate professional, there's this sort of need to knock him off his pedestal, which I just don't understand. Any Spurs manager or England manager you ever speak to will say they would love to have 11 Harry Kanes. People who have this incredible work ethic, who just want to constantly improve and get better. Harry Kane was the best 9 in the Premier League. He wasn't satisfied with that. He decided just suddenly, I'm just going to become the best 10 in the Premier League as well. And he's done that as well. He is constantly improving as a footballer. I can't say enough nice words about the guy. You never see him stumbling out of a nightclub at 3 o'clock in the morning. He's the ultimate professional. And yeah, I just hope he stays at Tottenham for the rest of his life. But if he doesn't, and if he goes off to Old Trafford and wins a Premier League title, fair play to him. There'll be nobody happier than, most Spurs fans.
Yeah. Man City ship's definitely sailed. I'm going to mute you, Jamie, just because of the feedback. So no offence, don't take any offence, please. Just for the feedback. So I've just muted you there. I'll tell you who's world class, John. Is Philip Billing. And I'll tell you what I want on Saturday is I want 10 Ryan Christies. This is our predicted 11 from the Fantasy Football Scout app that I pulled this from. It's got Neto in goal. It's got former Spurs, but now Bournemouth, Adam Smith. We got Jack Stevens, Chris Mepham, Lloyd Kelly, Ryan Christie, Joe Rothwell, Lerma, Tavernier to come in for Dongo Utara, Philip Billing, top goal scorer, Solanke looking for goals. That is the predicted 11 for us. And I don't think that is far away.
No, I think you find a lot of Bournemouth fans that will put that as their predicted 11 for this weekend. I think there was definitely a significant outcry in terms of Billing being sort of dropped back into the double pivot against Brighton. I don't think it was a move that was inherently disastrous, but I think a lot of Bournemouth fans definitely think it would be just because of how important he is for us further up the pitch. And really, if you take Billing out of that attack, if you put in Traore, if you manage to put Tavernier and Ouattara in there, there's just a hell of a lot of goals that's taken out. He's our top scorer on 7, beating the next best by 3. He's just so impactful further up the pitch. The intelligence he's got is making his runs, but not only that, he drops deeper and is incredibly influential defensively. He quite often produces the most tackles in the team despite playing in the number 10 role. He's got so much in his game, and has actually got his head on the end of things a lot more often this season as well than he ever used to. I'm kind of not all that surprised that a bigger team hasn't sort of decided they're going to go for him. But there was obviously rumours when we were in, I think, first or second season in the Championship. There were rumours that maybe a Spanish team might come in for him, or there might be a bit of interest from abroad. But I think now he's sort of shown himself to be, I wouldn't say above the quality of the rest of the team, but he's certainly just, he's the guy that you notice. You notice he scores the goals, he sets up chances, he wins the ball back, he finds himself in good positions, he makes fantastic runs. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a decent amount of interest for Billing come the summer. Hopefully we stay up and he doesn't leave and he continues to catapult us up the table. But it's been the case for a good 18 months that he's been our best player. And I think that it certainly was the case. I think when I was talking to opposition fan bases, I think that if you were sensible as an opposition team, just stick a man on him. You might well lose that battle a few times. He is very strong, but almost everything we do that's good goes through him. But having Tavernier back in the squad as predicted there, I think is a sensible move. I think Ouattara has just not been very comfortable on the left-hand side, and Christie's kind of undroppable at the moment with his work rate and what he's doing for the side. But apart from that, I think it all spells it out for itself. The only one would be Senesi. He's back in training. He could come in, but I think the display against Leicester just reminded Bournemouth fans that Mepham is an incredibly good defender. When all he has to do is defend, he doesn't have to worry about playing too many passes out from the back. He is a very, very intelligent and capable defender. And I think it would be very harsh to drop him after his performance.
Definitely is. Great performance. Said that on the reaction at the King Power. Jamie, are you worried about Philip Billing? And some fans are now starting to call for Kiefer Moore, who hurt you earlier on in the season. But Dom Solanke seems to have that shirt up top.
Yeah, well, look, I think Bournemouth can definitely get something from this game. I'd echo what you boys say. I think Billing has been Bournemouth's standout player all season and most of last season in the Championship as well. I'm surprised that there haven't been a few clubs sniffing around him. I think his versatility is incredible as well. He can play a number of different positions equally well. He's a goal threat, but he's a big, physical, imposing unit as well. I think he's defensively pretty strong at times. Kiefer Moore caused Spurs all kinds of chaos back in October. I think that was because we were playing with a bit of a makeshift back three. I think with Romero, Dyer, and Longley, I think he would pose less of a problem because I think he's a bit sort of one-dimensional. I think there's much more to Dominic Solanke's game, so I understand why he's got the shirt. But to go back to sort of what John was saying earlier, so many of those sides that are being sucked into the relegation battle just strike me as sides bereft of confidence. I look at Southampton, Leicester dropping like a stone, Nottingham Forest dropping like a stone. Leeds just can't get anything from anywhere. Whereas Bournemouth, and it all sort of stemmed, I think, from the Liverpool game. Bournemouth play with this sort of, cockiness and assuredness that we're going to get ourselves out of this. They seem like the one side down there, and I think West Ham and Palace have now pulled themselves clear, and Wolves as well. But Bournemouth seem like the one side of the bottom 7, if you like, 6, 7, who are playing with a bit of confidence about them. So I think they'll go to Tottenham just like they went to the Emirates a few weeks ago, thinking, well, why can't we have a go and get something from this game? And I don't think it's Gary O'Neill's style to go there and park the bus. I think he's going to look at a Spurs side, which, as John was saying has been sort of failing upwards for a lot of time this season, and think, do you know what, if we get the first goal in this game, that crowd will turn. It'll be, oh, Simon, bloody Tottenham again. And we can absolutely get them under pressure because that defence is fragile at the best of times. And the midfield is always overrun, it seems, against most sides. So you're just relying on Harry Kane and Heung-min Son to bail you out and keep them quiet. And I can see Bournemouth definitely getting something.
You had to remind me of the Emirates. I couldn't quite believe what happened that day. As long as there's not 6 minutes at the Tottenham Stadium on Saturday added on, then I'll be absolutely fine because I think we've got a chance.
Believe me, as Spurs fans were equally sick about that result.
Ross, in that Bournemouth predicted 11, there wasn't a certain Jon Zemura, and we won't see Jon Zemura in a Bournemouth shirt again this season. or going forward, because he's signed for Udinese. This has picked up some speed this weekend. We know that there's been some contract issues or non-communications. Now, this is a player, correct me if I'm wrong, that you might have tempted to sign previously with Leyton Orient. But your thoughts on Jon Zemura, because this is a big decision that he's made. For all of his good attributes that he has for Bournemouth, especially going forward, overlaps as a fullback. Questionably, Bournemouth fans have questioned his defensive attributes as being his weakness. And he's going to a league now that they sort of claim that they sort of look about defending before they attack. So, Jon Zemura, talk to me, because I know you do like him as a player, but this is a big decision, and it's a shame for Bournemouth fans that he's no longer going to be a Bournemouth player.
Yeah, I suppose the first part of that, really, I was very keen to try and take him, albeit in League Two, before he broke into the team. So from a recruitment perspective, League Two club always looking at the players that are not quite known yet, not broken into a team, maybe not had their first loan opportunity, if that's the route some of them have to go down. So we were very keen at Orient to try and bring him in. We were unable to do so, but he was a player that we really liked. So from that perspective, I always sort of try and keep an eye out on those types of players to see if you were right or wrong in terms of their development and where you think they might get to. And he's obviously kicked on really well. I think one of the things really now is when we look at fullbacks, I suppose people have pretty much our era in terms of watching young players grow up or watching our teams play and the teams that we support or that we're involved in, is defending isn't always the first side of a fullback's responsibility these days, especially a young one. So I think that the fact that he's dynamic, he can overlap, he'll cross, he might chip in with a goal, assists. He's at the forefront of so much of a young player's development in that position these days. So he's clearly got a lot of those attributes in abundance. And then it's about sometimes once they break into the team or once they start to be in and around the first team, developing those defensive attributes. So if he's going into a team that are going to have, responsibility of having the ball and be attack minded, he's going to get a lot of those opportunities. And clearly his pace and his creativity going forward are big strengths of his. So, and then I think the flip side of that, the fact that he's going abroad, tells you a little bit about when you mention about his contract and some of the loopholes that come in now of losing players that move abroad, that have come through the academy. There's also those big parts of that as well. We've seen it with the boys that are playing in Germany, English boys that are playing in Germany now, outside of people like Jude Bellingham. But the transfers and the compensation rights for English clubs when players go abroad are really adjusted and not quite as tough and as strict for people to manipulate in this country. Were he to be going to Man City, it would dictate a transfer fee or a certain amount of compensation dependent on the amount of time he's been at a particular club. But when they go overseas across border into Europe, it's a completely different thing altogether. So there'd be some incentive behind, I'm sure, the advice that he's getting, the opportunities and the clubs and options that were presented to him would make a real difference as to where he went with him going abroad.
John, we're going to go into those score predictions in a moment in this match preview, but briefly, I know you've always been a big fan of Jon Zemura. I have as well. It's a shame that he's leaving the club. It's a shame that we couldn't work out a deal for him. He was growing very, very nicely. I actually think he broke into the team ahead of time because we didn't have a massive squad at the start of last season when Scott Parker was starting his project, but he did kick on. He's had some good moments. He's had some learning moments. This is a massive decision for him. Watch this space in how it works out. But it is a shame that Jon Zemura is no longer going to be a Bournemouth player.
Yeah, it really sucks because I do think that he
he could have been looking further up in the Premier League. I mean, he had quite a few suitors, including the likes of Newcastle, that are definitely were looking at possibly bringing him in. Admittedly, I don't think that would ever going to happen, but the scouts of bigger teams are always looking at all the youngsters that are slightly further down the pecking order, just even in the Premier League, let alone in the Championship and further down. I feel sorry for Jadon Anthony as well, because I mean, we all know that Jordan Zemura and Jadon Anthony played better when they played together. They had, they were best friends off the pitch, and the combinations that they played. You only need to look at when Jadon Anthony, his most recent game for us. I'm trying to remember which one that was. It was about 3 or 4 games ago. He started on the left-hand side and he got nothing. He got absolutely nothing going forward because Kelly doesn't provide that support going forward. He's a centre-back. He doesn't move up the pitch. So Jadon Anthony went from having every combination he could fancy under the sun with him, Zemura and Billing, to nothing. Literally just having to try and take 2 people on because he couldn't get the pass out because there wasn't the support there. But what I would say is that the interesting thing I've seen at times for some comments is talks about, if Zemura just improves his defending, he'll come on. And it's just like, I'm sorry, but you're just wrong. He's been one of our best defenders all season statistically. I was showing the numbers up about halfway through the season, and so you look at Adam Smith, he's far better defensively in terms of his percentages and his ability. Even some of the centre backs he was doing better than in terms of his tackle percentage rate. That season in the Championship just was the total making of him. We all remember those first sort of 15 minutes against West Brom, and you thought, this is going to be a hell of a long season for this kid. Half an hour later, he was fantastic, and he just kept it going through the whole season. And then he came into the Premier League, and you just thought, fantastic. As long as he doesn't get injured, we'll be fine. He did get injured for a bit, but I think it is a decent loss, not only because of the transfer fee, I think would have been fantastic, but also he definitely could have carried on developing. He would have maintained being our first choice left back. I think we would have struggled to find a player better than him for decent money going forward into next season, but now we've got to, because with Zemura leaving and Vigna only on loan, we don't have a recognised left back in the squad. They're going into next season, so there'll be a decent bit of delving into the transfer market. But I wish him well, but I am sad that he's gone, and I do wonder what kind of reception he would get if he came back, because Bournemouth fans can be a little bit bitter about these things.
Do subscribe to Cherries Red Army. Do hit the like button. If you're watching this video back because you couldn't catch us live, do put your thoughts in the comments. It's that moment. It's your 1 minute warning. Get those score predictions in the chat for Tottenham versus Bournemouth on Saturday. We're going to get the score predictions from John, Ross and Jamie. And let's quickly have a look at the other fixtures in the Premier League this weekend.
Yeah.
In the Premier League this weekend, Aston Villa kick off 12:30 versus Newcastle. Newcastle going for 4th. Southampton take on Crystal Palace. Everton against Fulham. Tottenham Bournemouth. Wolves against Brentford. Chelsea Brighton. Manchester City taking on Leicester in the late kickoff on Saturday. West Ham on Sunday versus Arsenal. Nottingham Forest against Manchester United. And Leeds versus Liverpool on Monday. We've had Mark McAdam on our channel a few times this season, Jamie. He said it's been one of the most amazing Premier League seasons. Everything is going on in every potential position that you could do something.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a bizarre Premier League season, partly because there's been a World Cup right smack bang in the middle of it. And until a couple of weeks ago, and arguably still, we've got 9 teams in a relegation battle, which, when have you ever seen that before? You've got Chelsea just looking like a shadow of what they should be, given the amount of class players they've got. Liverpool failing to perform as well. And then, unfortunately, and I say this as a Spurs fan, you've got Arsenal sitting at the top of the table. I don't think anybody saw that coming. I do still think, /hope, /pray, that City will just pip them to the post. But again, Newcastle doing a great job. They've got a great manager there. Don't know where he's come from, but he's doing a great job up at Newcastle. Look, there's been a lot going on this season, but for Spurs fans, it's been a largely forgettable one.
An exciting Premier League season, Ross.
Yeah, like Jamie's just touched upon there, very surreal, really, to a degree. So many up and down and unusual scenarios. I'm not sure. I know, like again, Jamie's just touched upon there about how the bottom third, if you like, of the league is now starting to take a little bit more shape in terms of who is and isn't is still in the threat of going down. But I can't remember a season like that where near enough the whole bottom half of the league is looking over its shoulder. And also like things like the start to throw the World Cup in, but the start to the season that Palace had, everyone was raving about what Vieira was doing with Palace before they went away for the World Cup break, and then just before, and then obviously as soon as they come back, the wheels come off drastically, and they go from having a great first, I don't know if it was first half, but first part to the season before that break, and then finding themselves in a real strange scenario. Don't have a shot for 3 games, and then Roy Hodgson takes over and they score 5. So again, just adds another little surreal spin to it. Just referring to Tottenham, really, from my perspective, it's really strange when you look at it, like touched upon earlier, that having no draws at home and the amount of wins that they've had, but yet it's still a really disappointing season because of the style of play and the way that the whole manager thing has panned out in terms of having another world-class manager that hasn't quite gone according to plan. So yes, the Premier League never fails to let us down, but this one's been a really unusual one.
It has. Right, John, let's get our Bournemouth score predictions out, because we have never got a point at Tottenham in Wembley, in the new stadium. Never got anything. Tottenham have had no draws in the Premier League at home this season. Going optimistic, I think if we can try and stop Harry Kane and Son and Richarlison and Danjuma if he comes off the bench, or they maybe have an off day in front of goal, and we can be a threat going forward with Billing higher up, floating around, arriving late in the box. I'm going for a 1-1 draw. I definitely think there are chances for Bournemouth. It could also go the other way and we get an absolute battering, but I've got to be optimistic, and I'm going for a 1-1 draw. What's your score prediction for Tottenham Bournemouth?
Yes, the easy task of stopping Son, Kane, Richarlison if he comes on, Danjuma, who we've obviously dealt with before. So, it's not exactly the easiest task. As we mentioned earlier on, it's like the weaknesses that you see mostly when you look at that Spurs squad is going to be sort of like, can we try and overwhelm the central midfield, given they only play with 2 men in central midfield, although Dyer does get a little bit of a license if tactically to push up a little bit? Or can we maybe take advantage of Dyer can be inconsistent, Longley can be inconsistent? There are areas where you look at Spurs defensively and think, maybe we can make something happen, but we've got to get up the pitch to do that. And I do wonder that, could this turn into more of a game like we had against Arsenal? Admittedly, I would love for us to score within 11 after 11 seconds again. But, if we could well be defending for 95% of the game. But at the same time, there's a decent amount of confidence in the squad. I am also sort of battling with my head and my heart. I do think my heart says 1-1 as well.
Mm-hmm.
My head probably is going with a very narrow loss. I would say 1-0 or 2-1 wouldn't surprise me, but I think I'll go with a 2-1 loss.
Okay. 2-1 with your head and a draw with your heart. Mark Singleton, thank you for joining us this evening. He's also going for a Bournemouth draw, 2-2 goals at the Tottenham Stadium. Ethan Burney's going for Bournemouth 2, Spurs 1. That'll be our first Premier League win at Tottenham. We've also got another 2-1 for Bournemouth. We've got a sneaky 1-0 to the Cherries. These are some confident results since we come away from the King Power. AFC Bournemouth Germany's going for, would love for us to get a point, but realistically a 3-1 to Tottenham. 1-1 against Spurs, 1-1 again, but heart is 2-0. So there's a head and heart there from Carol. Cameron's going for a draw. 1-1 from Phoenix, 1-1 from Sean. Lots of draws in here, Jamie. 3-3, 2-1 to the Cherries from Chris, 3-2 to the Cherries. This is a Bournemouth fan channel. We're going to leave Ross to the end because he might have a half and half scarf on. Jamie, what's your score prediction on Saturday?
The one thing I can categorically rule out, I think, is Spurs battering Bournemouth. I just don't see that happening. I don't think Spurs are a side at the moment capable of battering anybody, and I don't think Bournemouth are a side that look like they would get a battering either. I think they've As I said, they're playing with confidence at the moment. They play on the front foot. I can see Spurs starting very poorly once again, and that stadium getting very quiet, the crowd getting on top of Spurs. Maybe a little moment of magic from either Kane or Sonny putting Spurs 1-0 up. Bournemouth getting an equaliser, and Spurs somehow managing to just fluke a winner and winning 2-1. And Bournemouth, once again, probably not deserving to leave with nothing, but that's the way I can see it panning out. I just think it's going to be another grind for Spurs. I don't think they're going to be playing champagne football. And Bournemouth, I think, might just get a bit unlucky, and a couple of bits of magic from two of our world-class players, as it was against Brighton, might be the difference maker. So I'm going to go for 2-1 Spurs.
Ross, just to help you here with your score prediction. So no draws for Tottenham at home. Our current form guide for Bournemouth is win, lose, win, lose, win. So what are you going for Tottenham Bournemouth this weekend?
Well, first of all, two things. When Jamie started off his answer with the words categorically, he could have easily followed it up with categorically no chance of me wearing a half and half Tottenham and Bournemouth scarf. That's where Tottenham kit for 3 years when I worked there. It's not a good thing with my family. So just
okay.
That. Yes, you've got no chance of seeing that half and half scarf in the background. My son's just shouted out that Tottenham are going to win 3-1, but I'm not going to go down that route. I think I really like the fact that I touched upon it. I'm not sure if it was on while we were on or just before that. O'Neill sets the team up to be positive and as positive as he can be with a team with, where Bournemouth are at. But I really like that about him. So I don't think he'll go and sit there and wait to get turned over. I think a lot of the game will depend on the way in which Tottenham are sent out there. We've covered the fact that Conte set them out to be difficult to beat in the first half and had a go at teams in the second half. So I think that will dictate a lot of the game in terms of the way that Tottenham really come out if they try to take the game to Bournemouth, because with the world-class players, with the quality that they have got, with a Perisic has had a great season, they've got quality in the squad, in the team to go and win the game. I do think that that Bournemouth will score, and I'm going to properly sit on the fence. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw in a similar fashion to yourself, Kirk.
1-1 draw. Very good stuff. Thank you for all your interaction in the chat this evening. Thank you for those scores. It's going to be an interesting game on Saturday. Make sure you hit the like button. Do subscribe. I know we've slightly overrun on this preview, but like Jon said, when you get a celebrity lineup like this, you've got to make the most of it. Also, celebrities on Cherries Red Army are our monthly members who constantly show us their money to help support the channel. So thank you very much. You can visit buymeacoffee.com/Cherries Red Army. You can donate or become a member. These details are in the description below. Jon, we'll see you many more times this season. Thank you again for your input on this preview. We're just a few days away from kickoff. Can't wait.
Yes, thank you very much for having me on again, Kirk. And I am looking forward to this one. I'm hoping this will be a lot more even than our recent visits to the Tottenham grounds, whichever one it would call when we last went there.
Ross, thank you again for coming on. You're so kind. I know you've been on before. I know you like talking about the Cherries, and yes, we'll definitely catch up again soon, hopefully.
Always, mate. Thanks very much for having me on.
No worries. And Jamie, thank you so much as well. I know you've had a busy week. Final question. Going to beat Eddie to fourth?
I'm one of those very rare things, which is the glass half full Spurs fan. There's not too many of us around, and I still think that we might go and maybe nick something at St James's Park, beat United at White Hart Lane, maybe get a draw at Anfield. I don't know. We got a tricky run in, but there's still enough class in that Spurs squad that, if they can just get a bit of confidence back in, we can have a strong end to the season. But first up, this is a really tricky one for Spurs on Saturday. I think to call it banana skin is being disrespectful to Bournemouth. I think Bournemouth are a side playing with confidence, who I think are going to be safe, and I think they could really get something from out of that game. So either way on Saturday, I'm covered in terms of the headgear that I'll be wearing on Sunday, regardless of the result.
Absolute quality. Mike's going to love that. Hopefully he'll watch this video back. Fantastic. Just mute that again. I'm just getting a bit of an echo, but love that. Love that image. We'll have to screenshot it. Fantastic. Right. Thank you to you, the fans. We'll bring you some content over the weekend. We're going to go there. We're going to give it our best shot. It's a fantastic stadium. Can it be different this time round? Not yet. Had a penalty in the Premier League. Maybe on Saturday. But from me, John, Ross, and Jamie, thanks for checking out this preview. Do hit the like button. Look after yourself the next few days. And we'll see you on the next one. Up Cherries.
Up the cherries.